I have long wanted to discuss books on this channel. Today's the day. If you don't know who he is, Tad Williams is the best-selling author of over 20 novels. He's sold more than 17 million books, and he's inspired the likes of George R.R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, and me. He's one of my favorite authors, an incredible human being. I've been reading and collecting his books for over 30 years. This is most of them right here. Today I want to show off my collection, talk about Tad's worlds, recount my experience with them, and finish with an idea to maybe give something back. So let's get started. The year was 1991. I was 16 years old. I lived in Ottawa, Illinois. We had a Walden Books at the local mall, and teenage Kevin would camp out alongside the narrow shelf of sci-fi and fantasy books, searching for a new world in which to adventure. That's when I met Simon. He stood amidst 1,000 blue butterflies, holding a mirror, an arrow, and a sword. With a white lock streaking across his red hair, how could anyone not be curious? That book was The Stone of Farewell by Tad Williams. I still have it. It's right there. Thankfully, I realized this was book 2 of a series, so I grabbed book 1, The Dragonbone Chair, which is right there. That's the copy I read in 1991. I started reading, gave up after 100 pages because those tunnels beneath the Hayholt are a trudge the first time you encounter them. But eventually I returned, emerged from those tunnels, and the rest is history. 3 decades later, this is what we have. Let me make a little room here. Ugh. Some of these are duplicates and special editions, but Tad is undoubtedly prolific. He can also be lengthy. As they say, there's never been a trilogy he couldn't finish in 4 books. But where some see wordiness, I see character development, subtle and intricate plotting, and rhythmic, beautiful prose. I love everything about Tad's writing style. Now, I am not exactly sure what this video is or will be. The long-awaited final novel of Tad's Last King of Osten Ard series hits shelves this week, and I wanted to do something special. I pulled all the books off the shelves at home and brought them here without any plan whatsoever. I guess we'll just take a walk through them chronologically, I guess. I have a few notes that I've written down so I don't sound like a total fool, rambling and mumbling, but other times I'll probably be winging it. As I said, I have some special editions here to show off and even a few non-book related items. So let's do this. But first I am going to make some space before I knock all these books over. I said I was going to do this in chronological order, but here's a dirty little secret. Tad's first book is the only one I've never read. I own it, multiple copies even, but I've never actually read it. I sort of hang on to it as a mystery, keep it safe for a rainy day. My daughter read it when she was a teenager and she enjoyed it, and I'm sure I will as well. It's about a cat named Tailchaser. It's about Tailchaser's adventures, and that's all I know. But it did launch Tad's career, and that makes it notable. I have this copy here with some wrinkles in it, some scratches. That's okay, I bought this off eBay because it was a first edition and I didn't own it in hardcover at the time, so that's why I picked it up. I also have this copy from Grim Oak Press. It's beautiful, well illustrated. This was the first book that Grim Oak Press did of Tad's, signed, numbered. Very cool. This is apparently the limited edition. I also have, because I am a Tad fan, or I wouldn't be making this video, but I've got this, I don't even know if that'll be in focus, but this is a collectible edition of some sort of the same book. Let's take a look here. Leather cover, very nice. Unique artwork on the inside. I'm not going to open it up too much to show you. I do like to collect my books, but 52 signed copies. That, my friends, is Tailchaser Song. Tad's next series is the one that first caught my eye that day in the bookstore in 1991, and I am not alone. It has, I'm sure, a million readers Who knows? It is epic fantasy, a somewhat medieval setting, castles and horses and such, a touch of magic, a treasure trove of world building, elegant and sophisticated and complex characters and peoples, beautifully described settings, love, loss, adventure, nightmares, swords, dragons, and romance. I am talking about Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. At the most basic level, it's the story of Simon, a castle scullion apprenticed to a knowledgeable old man named Morganes. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. I've always said Morganes. I've never listened to these audiobooks, so I don't know the proper pronunciation. I apologize to those of you who pronounce it differently. Palace intrigue ensues, bad things happen, and Simon finds himself fleeing the castle to survive. I don't want to go into more detail than that. What I want is for you to go read it yourself if you haven't already. Osten is a deeply developed world, rich in character and scenery and history. It starts off slow, but soon you'll discover, the mystery of the swords. You'll meet Binibek and Kantaka and Miriamel and Tiamat, and it's a tale that kind of builds to this epic and satisfying conclusion. I read this series the first time when I was 16 years old. I read it again in my 40s, and it holds up. It made me cry at the end. So much modern fantasy has replicated it and mimicked it that it may not feel as fresh as it did to a teenager in 1991 who had just discovered fantasy, but only because so much modern fantasy has been inspired by it. In fact, some aspects of A Song of Ice and Fire feel lifted directly from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Martin even pays homage in Game of Thrones. If you look closely and pay attention, there is a section about two brothers named Elias and Joshua, both of whom play crucial roles in this trilogy. But despite the similarities, Tad's writing is different. I've heard him describe his tone as more optimistic, and I think that's accurate. I think that's correct. That's certainly how it feels to me. As a sometimes naive and overly optimistic human, I think I'm drawn to his writing for those reasons. The worlds can be dark and despairing, but hope and optimism and believing in the goodness of people is a better outlook to have, to me, than glorifying death and despair. So let's take a look at the books here. For those new to the world, Dragonbone Chair is the first book, Stone of Farewell is book 2, and To Green Angel Tower is book 3. If you notice, he worked hard to fit this one in. In fact, in paperback, it is 2 different books. I will bring those out now. This, as I mentioned in my intro, is the book I bought in 1991. It's got a little sun damage. I mean, this thing was red. I didn't have a Kindle back then. I know it, it's got this little art on the inside. I know later editions didn't have this secondary page or secondary cover. I don't know when they switched, but this book has traveled with me across the country twice, maybe 3 times, as I moved from place to place to place. And I keep it close, I keep it safe. I did have a couple of books damaged in a flooded basement a few years back. But we got that. This is the book that I first saw. The very first encounter I had with Tad Williams was this book at Walden Books, sitting there on the shelf. This cover, what can I say? It just drew me in. Michael Whelan, the acclaimed science fiction and fantasy artist, I believe did all of these covers, did most of Tad's covers all the way up to the last couple books. But you got me with this one. Sorry, Tad, Michael Whelan got me with this one. You didn't, but it wouldn't exist without you, so you do get some credit, I think. Here we have book 1 and 2, Wait a minute. I think I saw some. Hold on. Hold on. Before we go to that, check this out. In the early 90s, with probably Microsoft Paint, I made myself some custom bookmarks. I had them for every book. I don't know if I have the ones for these or not, but I enjoyed making bookmarks. Print shop, maybe. You know, when these came off the printer, they had the little dot matrix things on the side, and you had feeling old. But I did make some of my own bookmarks back in the day. To Green Angel Tower was split into book 1 and 2. I think they have names. I swear one is called Siege and one is called Storm, but they're just part 1 and 2 here. So, not sure why that is. So we got those. I have a lot of books in this series. So, To Green Angel Tower originally came with 2 covers. It came with this cover, and then it came with this cover. The back was moved to the front, and I didn't have that copy. This is the copy I read back in 1993 or whenever it came out. I was in high school. It looks pretty good for a 30-year-old book that I actually read. I don't tend to open my books very wide, so I preserve the bindings pretty well. But I did at some point on eBay or somewhere pick up the other copy. These other books are all collector's editions. This is, like with Tailchaser's Song, this is a Grim Oak Press edition of the Dragonbone chair. I will talk about this more in a minute at a later part of this video, but I do have them. They're beautiful. I love this cover. I have the same thing for the Stone of Farewell, which comes in this pretty case with a sword on it. There are far more eloquent ways to describe these things than I'm doing right now. I apologize. This art here matches this art here. I will talk about the artist that did that. It was not Michael Whelan. I will talk about that in a little while. I have multiple copies of those, and To Green Angel Tower is in the works. It's going to be 2 books. So when Grim Oak Press releases book 3 of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, it is 2 books because it's very long. Lastly, I've got a very special copy of To Green Angel Tower here. I will talk about this again at the end of the video because there's something I want to say about it and something I want to do with it. But this thing is miraculous. Okay, and that's it. There's my Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn collection. Moving on. Next up, we have the series that made me first fall in love with how books looked on a bookshelf. These things are gorgeous. Again, Michael Whelan, well done. I've read a lot of books on the metaverse recently. I've been fascinated since I first read this series. It's called Otherland. Those metaverse books kind of all mentioned Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, and most of them mentioned Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I like both those books, but neither of them, in my opinion, especially Ready Player One, can hold a candle to Otherland. It is, to me, the most prescient, is prescient the right word? Prescient? The most prescient sounds better. The most prescient representation of where VR has gone and is going. Far more so than Ready Player One. What differentiates it so much from those other two to me, as far as I remember, because it's been a while since I've read it, is it's actually a much less dystopian world. It has its issues, don't get me wrong. It's got its cabal of rich, powerful, real-world villains, and the plot centers around children falling into strange comas while connected to VR. But the offline world felt much more grounded. It's more optimistic about people and technology and the ways in which it can be used than those other two books were. And again, as I mentioned with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, optimism and hope in humanity is one of Tad's trademarks, and it shines through here. In these books, we're in a near future, 50, 100 years from now. It's not really specified, I don't think. A lot of commerce happens not only online, but in virtual reality. It's called the net, which does in some way date these books to the 90s, but that's okay. Some users access Otherland with a simple handset. Others have neutral buoyancy haptic tanks where your body is sort of free to move in the virtual world. Still others have chips implanted in their brains to access with minimal latency. All you gamers out there understand what minimal latency means. It makes the experience that much smoother, that much faster, that much more real time. But none of this is presented as an evil. It's not presented as the inevitable collapse of society. The net, as it is called, is a rich, diverse collection of worlds that can offer benefits to humanity. One of the main characters uses the net for scholarly research, works at a university, if I recall. Another character is bedridden with a terminal illness and exists almost exclusively in virtual reality, living a life he couldn't otherwise live. Now, this all also costs money, and it's run by very powerful corporations, not too different than today's internet. And so people of privilege can use it in ways that less privileged people cannot. And some of the most privileged people will try to abuse the technology for their own selfish purposes. This is not a lot different than anything in the normal world. I did like Otherland better than Snow Crash, better than Ready Player One. Classifying it is difficult. If I had to pin down, I'd say it's fantasy with a veneer of science fiction. The brilliant VR setting gives Tad a chance to kind of go nuts with this creativity and world building. Inside this sci-fi virtual reality network, we basically have a bunch of fantasy worlds. We get to explore Middle-earth. We get to explore Alice in Wonderland, Oz, Greek mythology. It's so much fun and it's so creative, and decades later, I've never read anything quite like it. It's funny because so much of what happens in these books feels more and more like what we see in our day-to-day lives. Otherland consists of book one, which I think is called City of Golden Shadow, even though it doesn't have a name other than Otherland on the cover. I'm sure that was a debated decision, but the series itself is called Otherland. This is City of Golden Shadow. This is River of Blue Fire. This is Mountain of Black Glass, and this is Sea of Silver Light, assuming that I have them in the order I think I have them in. They all look pretty much the same from the back. The vanity of an author. Come on. Oh, let me talk about this real quick. So this book came out in 1996 or 1997. There was an email address included somewhere. I forget where it was, but you could email Tad. I didn't think it would work. You know, I tried it. I sent the email off, never thought I'd hear back, but I did. He wrote back. The internet was a very different place back then. I talk about that a lot in a blog post I wrote a few years back. I'll share the link in the description, but that led to like some of the most rewarding interactions, and I will never forget them. But I couldn't attend this author signing. It was happening very close to where my parents lived, but I was going to be out of town. And so I sent my little sister. She went, she met Tad, she got this, he signed it. For Kevin, my virtual friend, that was great. Like, I can't tell you what that meant to me at the time. It's nice of him to include his name there, since we obviously can't read it in the signature. But I got that one signed, or my sister got that one signed for me. At some point later on, years later when this came out, I lived in Clifton, Illinois. He obviously wants to know what I'm doing. No, correction, Clifton, New Jersey. Nobody knows where Clifton, New Jersey is except people that live in New Jersey. So he was surprised by that. Later on, at some point, or maybe it was the same time, I don't remember exactly, but I got this one signed, and I don't remember. Boom. Pleasure to see you again. This might have been in Seattle. I might have gotten that one signed in Seattle when I was living out there after college. Just for the sake, just so you can see it. These look great on the bookshelf. It's really such a fun and informative series. I highly recommend it to everybody. Next up, if you're looking for a standalone fantasy novel, this is the Tad book just for you. Real world meets the land of fairy, with warring families, class struggles, and just boundless imagination. If I'm being honest, I mainly only remember two things from this book. Applecore, who was a foul-mouthed sprite, was just awesome. One of the most fun characters if you like sort of snarky, sarcastic characters. How else to put it? I don't know. The other thing I remember when it came out was an author's note mentioning that a certain sequence might remind people of the tragedy of September 11th, 2001, even though the book had been written before that. I definitely remember the sequence, and the warning was a good one. I don't know if when I read it, I would have been reminded of 9/11, but I don't know if I'd have been reminded without that warning, but certainly some people may have. I mean, it was a pretty brutal destruction of a building and people trapped and things like that. So I think this book came out 2003. So very much at the forefront of our minds at the time. I don't have a lot to say about it. I enjoyed it. War of the Flowers, standalone novel. Moving on. Next, we have Shadowmarch. This began as an online experiment on Tad's website, tadwilliams.com. If you haven't been there, check it out. Great community. I don't remember all of the details. Maybe it was a subscriber-only thing, and the plan was to release it in like a serialized fashion. I think that's what it was. Honestly, I think Tad was just too ahead of the times. E-readers and tablets were not yet prevalent, nor were online subscriptions. So I just don't think there was a big enough market to make it a successful endeavor, but he did turn it into published books, and those of us who have been online since the early 90s thought it was cool. Of Tad's big series, it's arguably my least favorite, but I can't really say why. I don't remember a lot of it, for one. Now that could be because I was reading it while raising kids and building a company on little to no sleep. I remember the writing, as always, great. The world is fully fleshed out, but if I'm being totally honest, I don't think I cared enough because it felt a little like a retread of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Now, that might be unfair, but I certainly felt that way at the time. There's another point to be made here. I think the Shadowmarch years may have in some way informed Tad's return to Osten, the world of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I'm not sure how best to talk about it and have it make any sense, nor do I trust my memory to do it justice, but you get to see the mysterious northern enemies from their own point of view, their own perspective, I think. In a way, it adds a complexity to the story and the world, and it's something Tad goes on to do incredibly well in future Osten books, which we'll talk about here momentarily. So while I don't personally feel any need to return to Shadowmarch, I think it's really a critical area of Tad's career because it informed and improved what was to come later. So I don't know if that makes any sense. It was not my favorite series. There's nothing wrong with it. I still enjoyed it. It just doesn't stand at the level of the Osten books or Otherland, in my humble opinion, but it does set in motion, I think, Tad's return to the worlds that I love. We've got Shadowmarch, Shadow Play, Shadow Rise, and Shadow Heart. Again, if you like fantasy, if you like high fantasy, they're worth a read. They're thoroughly enjoyable books. Moving on. Next up, we've got Bobby Dollar. This is urban fantasy, which is not really my thing, but this series is totally fun. I think of it as Tad's noir phase. There's a sardonic main character who battles with the demons of hell. I can't not imagine Tad laughing hysterically to himself in his room all alone late at night as he wrote this series, probably cracking himself up with every other line. It's funny, it's dark, it's fun. If you like exploring the psychology of religious ideas and concepts through the prism of a sarcastic, down on his luck protagonist, this is the series for you. It is very different than everything else Tad has written. Dirty Streets of Heaven, Happy Hour in Hell, and Sleeping Late on Judgment Day. Bobby Dollar. Moving on. The last big series we'll talk about is this one right here, the one that is about to end, The Last King of Osten. We being like readers in general, especially fantasy lovers, especially Tad fans, were super excited when he announced that he was returning to the world of Osten. The journey has been spectacular. This one's a little bit harder to talk about because it's not over yet. By the time this video goes online, it will be concluded, I believe, assuming there's not a surprise book. I know he's working on another book in this world, but I don't know where it takes place. These two books on the outside are novellas and are technically not part of The Last King of Osten. Well, I was gonna say trilogy. It was supposed to be a trilogy. It's 4 books. This is what Tad does. It's okay. As far as I know, the only series that was not intended to be a trilogy was Otherland. This was supposed to be a trilogy. It was split into 4 books for publication. This book takes place maybe a year after Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and is about the continued battle that happened. This book takes place like 1,000 years before any of them and gives backstory into some of the mythology. They are not critical or essential reading, but they do offer a lot of backstory. And so I'm including them because he's been writing these all at the same time. This one's called Brothers of the Wind. As you can see, this one is The Heart of What Was Lost. The primary series, the primary trilogy, quadrilogy, Last King of Osten begins with the Witchwood Crown. I won't get into too many details, to avoid spoilers. The books take place 30 years after Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. We have some familiar characters. They're all older. We have other characters that we knew and loved who are dying or have died. My favorite part about this is the fact that it was written 30 years after Tad wrote the originals, and it takes place 30 years after those books. Our author has aged in those years, and he writes with the authority of someone who has aged. Us readers have aged as well, and we feel those truths of aging. Just this morning, I'm currently rereading The Witchwood Crown, and there's a line where one of the characters is trying to read a letter at night in a tent, and all he's got is a little flame, and he just can't see it the way he used to, but he's determined to read it. As someone who's got the progressive lenses and reads like this, that one felt all too real. It's all good, glad to still be around. Given the status of the main characters as adults, participating in the governance of Osten, this series also feels a bit more grown up in a good way. We're dealing with politics and political intrigue. There are plenty of callbacks to the original trilogy. They're occasionally cute, but most often they serve to advance the story or illustrate the headspace of a character. There is nostalgia and there is sentimentality, but they almost always serve a purpose in the story. I'm a nostalgic, sentimental fool, and boy did I get teary, and it was awesome. We've all seen TV shows or movies or books or like reunions or reboots that play too much on their previous incarnations or sort of become parodies of themselves. This is nothing of the sort. It is a proper and sensible continuation of the world as it might be 30 years later. There are new stakes, there are new characters, new challenges, new perspectives. I think you could probably read it without having read the first trilogy, but your experience will be very different. Like I said, I'm currently rereading it in light of the final book's release. I'm so excited to see what happens. That book is called The Navigator's Children, and it's probably out now. So you should read Memory Star on Thorn if you haven't. Read this if you haven't. Highly recommended. The one unfortunate thing, which is I know is a hot topic online, After Empire of Grass, which I think is one of the most beautiful book covers in the entire series. Like, this is Michael Whelan at his best. This is gorgeous. He did this cover as well, but I believe after this book, the publisher didn't want to pay him his fees, I guess, so they switched to someone else. I do like this cover, and The Navigator's Children, the next book, has a similar cover, and I do like it. It does make sense. The masks do play a part in all of this, but it would have been nice, especially for, bookshelf consistency, to see Michael Whelan finish out the series. Regardless, beautiful books. So those are Tad's big series. I've got a lot of little odds and ends here in my collection that I'm gonna talk about now. This isn't everything. I know Tad wrote a comic book and I've got a copy of it somewhere, but I can't for the life of me find it. It's probably in a box. But I do have a bunch of things here. I don't know a lot about any of them, but I'll try to get through them quickly. This is an arc for the Bobby Dollar series, Dirty Streets of Heaven. I think I won this, maybe like a Goodreads contest. I don't remember, but it showed up one day and I was very happy to have it. Let's see. Caliban's Hour. This is an old book. This came out, I don't know, like I want to say either during or right after Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I could be wrong. 1994. Obviously, it's related to The Tempest by William Shakespeare. I did read it. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. If I recall, it's the story of The Tempest written from the perspective of Caliban. So imagine that, and that's what you've got. I don't remember anything else. Next, we've got The Dragons of Ordinary Farm. This book is written by Tad along with Deborah Beale. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I've only ever seen it online. She is married to Tad. I read it with my kids. Yeah, I think a long, long time ago. I don't know what year this came out. 2009. Yeah, so my daughters would have been like 7 and 5, 7 and 4 at that time. I enjoyed it. It is a kid's book. There is a sequel to it that my daughter must have because I couldn't find it on my shelf. And I know they're working on a third book. But if you have kids, you want to introduce them to Tad and Deborah's world, that's the book for you. This book, called The Diary of a Dragon. I have no memory of this book at all. None. It is a Subterranean Press printing. Obviously it's short. It looks like it's written from the point of view of a dragon. I don't know where it came from. I don't remember getting it. The thing about Subterranean Press is you tend to order their books and then like a year later, they just show up on your doorstep. A lot of times I don't remember having ordered them. A lot of times I don't take them out of their cover. I just put them on the shelf to enjoy later. Recently, there was a Neil Stephenson book that I almost ordered because I had never seen or heard or read it. And turned out I had a Subterranean press copy sitting on my bookshelf. So again, I am in a very privileged place to be able to buy books and forget that I own them. I don't recommend it for everyone, but it works for me. This next batch, I believe these are all story collections, and I think there's some overlap. So we have the very best of Tad Williams, we have A Stark and Wormy Night, we have Right, and then this is just the same thing but a limited edition copy with this beautiful cover. You know, I really like these cases. They protect the books very well. When you're spending a lot of money on collectible books and limited editions, it's good to keep them protected. This Right and A Stark and Wormy Night are both Subterranean Press printings. I don't know if they have repeated stories or what. This is all a lot of different short works. And then this also has some short works. Let's see if we see a lot of overlap here. Nope, it looks like they're very different. The Happiest Dead Boy in the World. Great story. It's in the Otherland world. This has some nonfiction as well. So I have read some of these. I have not read it cover to cover. The Terrible Conflagration at the Quiller's Mint. That is related to Shadowmarch. And the Quiller's Mint, or it's actually a chat group, a chat room on his website. I believe he later turned it into a setting in the book. So very cool. This, I think when I looked earlier, this has some of the same short work that's in Right. I don't know where this came from. Someone must have like taken all the stories from there and just repackaged it in a paperback form. Not entirely sure, but short works of Tad Williams. Next we have Mirror World. And again, I didn't do any research for this video. I didn't have time. I don't remember what this is. It says, based on the acclaimed illustrated bestseller. I know Tad has written comic books in the past. This is an illustrated novel. I did read it many, many years ago, and I don't remember a thing about it. The unfortunate part of getting older is you forget the things that you read. It's an interesting phenomenon because when I first started reading, 16, 17, 18 years old, I mean, I could tell you what page of a book something happened on. I could be like, that happened right around page 102 in the bottom right corner. I don't know if I've lost that ability because I've read so much more since then. Like I had a very small, limited number of books that I had to remember at the time, but I can't do that anymore. I don't know if it's from reading on a Kindle for so many years or what, but I'm gonna attribute it to the idea that there's just so much more in my brain now that I can't make those recollections in the same way. Although I can, for some reason, remember music lyrics and song lyrics that I have no business remembering. But we don't get to pick and choose what our brains remember. Like I said earlier, there is a comic book, an Aquaman comic book that he wrote, at least one edition. He may have written 2 or 3, I don't remember. There's also a book that I am missing, that I know I have somewhere. It might be in a box somewhere. Child of an Ancient City, I think it was called. It was written with someone else. So that may be out there. I do not have it. in my accessible books. I do have a lot of books in storage. When my partner moved in, she is a more prolific reader than I am. And so we kind of split the bookshelves and I put a bunch of stuff in storage. One day, the dream is we'll have a house with a library big enough for all of our books. All right, next up we've got Unfettered, which is a collection of short stories put out by Grim Oak Press and Sean Speakman, who does a phenomenal job. This is an ARC, Advance Uncorrected Proof. They put these out separately, I think, to raise money. It is signed by several people. It's got lots of famous authors who contributed. You'll see stories by, Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. I think that was a Brandon Sanderson story that takes place in the Wheel of Time world. And he always very honorably credits Robert Jordan anytime he is doing anything in the Wheel of Time world. It's got Patrick Rothfuss in here, Tad, obviously, Terry Brooks, Lev Grossman, people who I have read and loved for years. So I highly recommend picking that up if you can. I think I have, this was the copy that came out before the final editions, and then, it came out again later with art. I believe this is Unfettered, yeah. So, got some beautiful art to it. It's signed, I think by everybody. Here, take a look. Yeah, everybody who contributed a story has their signature on this. I can't imagine this thing going through the mail to try and land on everybody's desk, but it's very cool. Check it out. Visit Grim Oak Press. They do lots of great fantasy stuff. Very high quality books. This is Unfettered 3. Just a new collection of additional stories. There is a Tad story in here, another Brandon Sanderson story. I don't know what the difference is. I know I read them at the time when I got them, but I haven't looked in a while. So check them out online, grimoakpress.com maybe? Or just Grim Oak. I don't know. You can find it. So Tad stories in all of them. And here we got two more. These are short story collections that include stories by Tad. Now, of all of these story collections, I don't know which ones have the same story published multiple times. I'm guessing these are different stories. We can find out real fast. And Ministers of Grace. That is different than The Burning Man. Some of these may exist elsewhere, but I don't know. If you're looking for Tad short stories, these do exist. Go find them. This next one, I can't show you. Not because I don't want to, not because it's anything secret, but because I haven't even opened it myself. This is a gold foil map of Osten. It was part of an Indiegogo campaign. It included a bunch of stickers and patches, I think, little odds and ends. I subscribed to all of it mostly for this, if I remember correctly, and for the short story. But this I am going to get framed. I don't know yet what frame I want to put it in. Maybe if I can, I'll show a picture of it on the screen, but it is sitting here waiting for me. And I've heard that sometimes these gold foil, gold leaf, gold foil, whatever it is, maps can be sensitive, and I don't want to touch it too much before getting it framed. So that's what this is. Almost at the end here. This one is cool. Grim Oak Press released a new version of the Dragonbone chair in 2022. 1 second, I've got it here somewhere. I already showed it to you. The cover art was painted by Donato Giancola. And I apologize, Donato, if I'm saying your last name wrong. I loved this cover right away. I don't always like new covers and new designs, but this one was just perfect. It's such an epic and memorable scene from the trilogy. It's the birth of Simon Snowlock. You can feel it all, the cold, the snow, the dragon's fiery breath, Simon's lucky leap to slay it. I ordered the book right away, the minute I saw it. Then a short time later, someone online on Reddit or Tad's website somewhere posted a link to the art on Donato's website. It was expensive, for sure. I am lucky enough to, have made some money in my career, and I was able to afford it. When I sat there wondering if I should buy it, I thought, this is something you love. This reflects a part of your life, an experience, friends and words that have journeyed with you across the country, books that have watched you from their place on your shelves since you were a teenager. It's okay to do it. It's meaningful. The reasons are good. You're supporting an artist. All good. It took some convincing because it wasn't cheap, but I bought it, and it's hanging right back there, right behind me. Hold on, let me go grab it. It's beautiful. It fits so well with the story. It conveys the scene so dynamically. I just, like, the minute I saw it, that it was available, I had to have it. So thanks to Donato for creating such a magnificent piece. Thanks to Sean Speakman at Grim Oak Press for commissioning it. I'm honored to have it hang on my wall, and it inspires me daily. Oh yeah, and thanks to Tad for writing it. I want to finish with this. This is one of a kind. It is a leather-bound copy of To Green Angel Tower, the last book in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn original trilogy. It is a prototype created by one of Tad's publishers as they explored a possible run of collector's editions. There is a video out there of Tad describing it, and I'll put a link in the description for that. He offered it as part of a charity auction in 2015 for the Pixel Project. They were raising money to fight violence against women, and so he offered this book up, and I don't remember if it was an automatic bid or if it was an auction. I think it was just, it had a price, and first person wins. And I saw it, and boom, done. The same reason I wanted that painting in the background, I wanted this book. It's such a part of my adult life. It's such a fond memory. It's such an inspiring, work of art. It is breathtakingly gorgeous. I never want to part with it. I love having it on my shelf, but I think the time to separate is near. For a good reason. I haven't shared this with anyone yet. If you're still watching, you'll be one of the first to hear. You're probably a big Tad fan anyway, if you've lasted this long. What I want to do with this book is return it to Tad, free of charge. He doesn't have to buy it from me. It is his, basically. I'm just borrowing it to look at it on my bookshelf. But my hope, and I suspect he'll go along with it, is that we can sell it in another charity auction to raise money for another cause. I don't know which cause that is. He can pick one or I can pick one. I don't think it matters. I tend to naively think the best of people and of the world, despite the lessons that reality sometimes throws at us. I would love to start this cycle of giving where we sell this book in a charity auction. Then after the purchaser has had a chance to exist and live with it for as long as they want, they return it to Tad and start the cycle over again. forever and ever and ever and ever. The book is beautiful. It will outlive us all if we take care of it. And I think we can make its legacy a great one. I'm not entirely sure how to make all this happen. If you have ideas, let me know in the comments or get in touch with me. I thought about making a website where each owner's name and charity could be recognized so we can sort of track all the good this book has done. The website's the easy part. I think trusting each new purchaser to return the book after a few years is the tricky part. And it's fair, right? Like, you donate money to a charity, get a book in return. That's it. That's the end of the deal. There's no requirement that you give it back at some point. But maybe we can do something cool with it. I'm not sure. So what if the next person doesn't return it? I can do my part. I think Tad will do his part, and we'll just have to see what happens from there. So that's the plan. I'm gonna very soon reach out to Tad, get him this. If he wants to keep it, he can, but knowing the person that he is and the fact that he's already been willing to part with it, I think he'll want to, do more good with it. And I think it certainly can be an item that will raise money for other needy causes. So that's what the plan is for this book. If I can let go of it. Let's. I'm gonna stack all the books back up on the table to finish up here. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If you're already a Tad reader, I appreciate you sharing the journey with me today. If you're not a Tad reader, I encourage you to become one. Give his books a try. I do not think you'll regret it. Now, I am just going to stare at them a bit. They've been scattered across so many different bookshelves for so many years. It's fun to see them all together. That's it. Kevin out. Take care, everybody. Quick update. I just got back from the bookstore. Look what's in. Go get your copy. It's out now.